case of Michael Maiden, the father accused of doing something that's really unthinkable. Before I get to the shocking thing that's happened recently, a quick recap on what got us to this point.
Every parent believes there are places where their child is safe. A best friend's house, a sleepover, a familiar adult who smiles, plans activities, and promises to look after everyone for the night. That trust is what this story is about. Because sometimes, danger doesn't come from strangers. It comes from someone who already has the keys, already has the confidence of parents, already knows exactly how far that trust can be stretched before it breaks. This case begins in a quiet Oregon neighborhood inside a beautiful home during what should have been an ordinary childhood milestone, a sleepover, laughter, food, movies, late-night whispers, nothing that would raise alarms, nothing that would make a parent hesitate, until a child felt something was wrong, not a sound, not a scream, just a feeling, deep, instinctive, and urgent, that something about this night was not safe. What followed was not just a crime. It was a violation that unfolded slowly, deliberately, and under the disguise of care. A betrayal that left children traumatized, families shattered, and a community forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones we never think to question. This is the story of a sleepover that ended in a hospital, a crime that could have ended in death, and a case that forever changed how parents define safety. Because once you hear what really happened that night, you will never look at trust the same way again. The sleepover was supposed to be simple. A handful of girls, all around 12 years old, gathered at a friend's house for a night of movies, snacks, and staying up too late. Their parents dropped them off without hesitation. This wasn't an unfamiliar place. It wasn't a new family. It was the home of someone they trusted, a father who appeared involved, attentive, and responsible. From the outside, everything looked normal. The house was large and comfortable, the kind of home that gives parents reassurance. Earlier that day, the girls had been taken out together. They got food, they did activities. It felt like a special treat, carefully planned and supervised. To anyone watching, it looked like a parent going above and beyond to make a sleepover memorable. But looking back, investigators would later describe that planning very differently, because none of it was spontaneous. After returning to the house, the atmosphere subtly changed. The girls were told exactly where to sit, what to do, and when to move. The rules were strict, nothing overtly alarming, just unusually controlled. Still, at that age, adults giving instructions isn't strange. No one questioned it. Then came the smoothies. Mango smoothies were prepared for each of the girls. They were handed out individually, each with a different colored straw. The host insisted that every girl drink the entire smoothie. There was no option to leave it unfinished. It wasn't presented as a suggestion. It was a requirement. At first, nothing seemed obviously wrong. But soon, one of the girls began to feel it. Her body felt heavy. Her thoughts slowed. A fog settled in her head that she couldn't explain. It wasn't the normal tiredness of a late night. It felt unnatural, like her body was betraying her. That's when her instincts started screaming. As the girls settled into sleeping bags in the basement, she stayed close to one of her friends, wrapping an arm around her as they tried to fall asleep. The sense of unease didn't fade, it intensified. Then the host came downstairs. Once, then again. He adjusted their positions, removed her arm from around her friend, stood too close, watched too carefully. At one point, he placed a finger under her nose. He was checking if she was asleep. That moment cut through the haze. Fear snapped her fully awake. Quietly, trying not to draw attention, the girl reached for her phone. Her hands felt slow. Her vision was heavy. Still, she managed to type a message to her mother, words filled with urgency and panic. "Please pick me up. Say there's a family emergency. I don't feel safe. Please, please come now." She added another message. "I might not respond. Please come get us." She was afraid she wouldn't be able to stay awake much longer. What the girls didn't know yet was that their bodies were already under the influence of a powerful drug. Their systems were shutting down faster than they could fight it. Staying conscious required effort. Their limbs felt unresponsive. Time felt distorted. When help finally arrived, the night didn't end with breakfast and laughter. It ended in an emergency room. Hospital tests revealed something that made doctors immediately concerned.
Michael Maiden, he is very fortunate that one of these girls didn't go into a coma or even worse.
The girls had been drugged with temazepam, a prescription sedative typically used to treat insomnia in adults. It is not prescribed to children. It carries serious warnings, even for adults, about slowed breathing, extreme sedation, and the risk of coma. For children, the danger is exponentially higher. One of the girls weighed barely 70 pounds. Medical staff were clear. The outcome could have been catastrophic: a slightly higher dose, a delayed response, a deeper loss of consciousness. Any of those factors could have resulted in permanent injury or death. Police were notified. An investigation began. Under questioning, the man admitted to putting the drug into the smoothies. He claimed he only wanted the girls to sleep. He said he was worried about them sneaking out. He described his actions as misguided concern, but investigators weren't convinced. Sedating children without medical supervision is not discipline. It is not safety. It is not care. It is control. As the case unfolded, more troubling details emerged. One of the girls later described previous sleepovers where she had felt strangely tired, confused, or disoriented. At the time, she hadn't understood why. Now, in hindsight, those memories took on a terrifying new meaning. She spoke about comments that had once seemed inappropriate but were brushed off, about moments of unwanted physical contact, about being made uncomfortable but not knowing how to articulate it at such a young age. She spoke about trust. "I trusted him because he was my friend's dad," she said later. "He used that trust." The psychological impact didn't end with the hospital visit. Sleep became difficult. Being in unfamiliar houses triggered anxiety. Drinking anything prepared by someone else felt dangerous. Medical appointments became terrifying. The idea of being sedated, even for legitimate reasons, caused panic. The trauma wasn't just about what happened, it was about what could have happened. Not knowing what might have occurred during the moments they couldn't remember haunted them. The loss of control over their own bodies left scars that words struggled to capture. When sentencing finally came, many were shocked. The man received just 2 years in prison. Parents of the victims called it a gift, a sentence far too light for a crime that could have killed their children. They reminded the court that luck, not restraint, was the only reason there wasn't a funeral instead of a trial. One girl, speaking in court, said something that stayed with everyone who heard it. "For a long time I thought this was my fault," she said, "but it wasn't. It was his." That realization didn't erase the damage, but it gave her something crucial back: her voice. And as the legal consequences continued to unfold, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't just a case about drugging children. It was about how easily trust can be weaponized and how close this story came to ending in tragedy. The hospital was supposed to be the end of it. For most families, an emergency room visit marks the moment when fear gives way to relief. Tests are run. Doctors explain what happened. Parents take their children home and begin the slow process of calming shaken nerves. But for these families, the hospital was not an ending. It was the beginning of something far more complicated. As medical staff explained the effects of the drug found in the girls' systems, parents began to understand just how close they had come to catastrophe. Temazepam is not a mild sleep aid, it is a benzodiazepine, a class of drugs known for suppressing the central nervous system. In children, especially those with lower body weight, the risks include respiratory failure, loss of consciousness, coma, and death. Doctors were blunt. This could have gone very differently. That realization settled heavily over everyone involved. Parents replayed the drop-off in their minds, the hugs, the casual goodbyes, the unquestioned trust. The knowledge that they had unknowingly placed their children into danger was devastating. Law enforcement moved quickly. When confronted, the man admitted to spiking the smoothies. He did not deny it. Instead, he tried to explain it away. He claimed he was worried about the girls sneaking out. He said he wanted them to sleep. He insisted he never meant to harm anyone. But intent was no longer the central issue. Impact was. Investigators noted the planning involved, the controlled environment, the insistence that each girl finish her drink, the repeated checks downstairs, the physical proximity while the girls were losing consciousness. This was not a moment of poor judgment. It was a series of deliberate choices. As the case progressed, the emotional toll on the girls became clearer. Some struggled to remember parts of the night. Others remembered too much: the fear, the confusion, the creeping loss of control. For children, that loss of bodily autonomy can be profoundly destabilizing. Therapists later explained that drug-facilitated crimes carry a unique kind of trauma. Victims are robbed not only of safety, but of memory. They are left to imagine what might have happened during the gaps. That uncertainty becomes its own form of suffering. For one girl, sleep itself became the enemy. She feared closing her eyes, feared not waking up, feared being unable to protect herself. Another became hypervigilant, watching adults too closely, questioning every gesture, every offer of food or drink. Trust, once automatic, had to be rebuilt from nothing. And then came the court proceedings. When the sentencing was announced, just 2 years in prison, the reaction was immediate and furious. Parents felt blindsided. For a crime that endangered multiple children, the punishment felt insultingly light. One mother spoke directly to the man in court, her voice shaking with rage. She told him that the sentence was a gift, not because he deserved mercy, but because the system was overwhelmed. She reminded him that luck, not innocence, was the only reason her child was alive. "You could have killed her," she said. "Dead, dead, dead." The words echoed long after she sat down. One of the girls also addressed the court. Her statement was raw and unfiltered. She spoke about how the man had encouraged sleepovers, about comments he had made in the past, about being touched without consent, about asking him to stop. She spoke about fear, and then she spoke about blame. For months, she had believed this was her fault, that she should have known better, that she should have done something sooner, that her friends were suffering because of her. It took time for her to understand the truth. It was not her fault, it was his. That moment, naming responsibility, was powerful, but it did not erase the anger many felt toward the sentence itself. Even professionals questioned it. Experts pointed out that drugging minors without consent is a form of assault, that using sedatives to incapacitate children strips them of agency and safety, that regardless of whether physical abuse occurred, the violation was profound. Still, the sentence stood. As the criminal case closed, another legal battle began. Months later, the father of one of the girls filed a civil lawsuit on her behalf. The suit sought millions in damages, not as a measure of greed, but as recognition of the lifelong harm inflicted. Therapy, medical care, emotional suffering, the loss of a sense of safety that could never be fully restored. The lawsuit named not only the man, but his spouse as well. The message was clear: accountability does not end with prison time. Eventually, the lawsuit was quietly resolved. Court documents confirmed that a settlement had been reached, though the amount was not disclosed. It likely never will be. For the families, the settlement was not about closure. Money does not heal trauma. It does not restore innocence. It does not make children forget, but it does acknowledge harm. Therapists explain that healing from this kind of trauma is not linear, especially for children. As they grow older, their understanding of what happened deepens. New questions arise. New layers of grief and anger surface. A 12-year-old processes fear differently than a 16-year-old. An adult revisits childhood trauma with an entirely different lens. That means the work never truly ends. There was also another child affected, one often overlooked in public discussion, the man's own daughter. These were her friends, her home, her father. She did not choose this. And yet, she would carry the weight of it, socially, emotionally, and psychologically, for years to come. Children of perpetrators often become collateral damage, struggling with shame, confusion, and isolation for crimes they did not commit. As the man serves his sentence, one reality remains deeply unsettling: he will be released. 2 years is not forever. June 2026 is not far away, and for the families involved, that date looms like a shadow. They are left asking the questions no parent ever wants to ask. How do you move forward knowing someone capable of this will walk free? How do you protect your children without teaching them to fear the world? How do you teach trust again without being reckless? This case did more than traumatize a group of girls. It permanently changed how parents in that community, and far beyond it, think about safety, supervision, and trust, because what happened was not loud, it was quiet, controlled, hidden behind smiles and smoothies, and that is what makes it terrifying. Long after the court hearings ended and the headlines faded, the real consequences of that night continued to unfold, quietly, privately, and relentlessly. For the girls involved, the trauma did not stay frozen in the past, it evolved. In the weeks after the hospital visit, many of them struggled to explain what they were feeling. There were no visible injuries, no cast, no stitches, no scars that others could point to and understand. Yet inside, everything felt different. Sleep became unpredictable. Some were afraid to fall asleep at all. Others slept too much, their bodies still associating rest with danger. Nightmares came without warning, sometimes replaying fragments of that night, sometimes inventing worse versions of what might have happened during the moments they couldn't remember. The drug had done more than sedate them. It had stolen certainty. Therapists explain that drug-facilitated crimes create a unique psychological wound. Victims are left with gaps in memory, and the human brain hates gaps. When memory fails, imagination fills in the blanks, and imagination is rarely kind. The question that haunted the girls most was not what happened. It was what could have happened. That uncertainty became a constant companion. It followed them into school, into friendships, into everyday situations that once felt harmless. Accepting a drink from someone else, sleeping over at a friend's house, Even sitting too close to an adult could trigger a sudden wave of anxiety. Parents noticed changes. Children who were once carefree became cautious, observant, hyper-aware of their surroundings. They asked more questions. They hesitated where they once rushed forward. Some became withdrawn. Others grew angry, lashing out in ways that didn't always make sense, but it made sense to those who understood trauma. Their sense of control had been taken away, and control is everything when it comes to feeling safe. Medical settings became another unexpected battlefield. Because the trauma involved drugs, anything related to medication now carried emotional weight. Doctors' offices triggered panic. The idea of being given medicine, especially something that might cause drowsiness, felt threatening. One therapist described this as a body memory. Even when the mind understands that a doctor is safe, the body remembers what it felt like to lose consciousness against its will. Heart rate increases, breathing becomes shallow, panic sets in. These reactions were not choices, they were survival responses. And as the girls grew older, the trauma didn't fade, it changed shape. What a 12-year-old processes as fear, a teenager might process as anger or shame. As their understanding of adult behavior deepened, so did the weight of what had been done to them. They began to see the night not just as something frightening, but as something profoundly wrong. The realization that an adult had deliberately drugged them forced them to confront a darker truth. There are people in the world who will exploit trust if given the chance. That realization is heavy for anyone. For a child, it is life-altering. Experts often emphasize that healing from this kind of trauma is not about getting over it. It's about learning how to live with it without letting it define every choice. That process takes years, sometimes decades, and it rarely follows a straight line. Some days feel normal, others feel overwhelming. Triggers appear unexpectedly. A smell, a flavor, a certain tone of voice. Even a smoothie can carry emotional weight. The civil lawsuit that followed the criminal case was one attempt to address this long-term impact. While the settlement details were never made public, legal experts agree that such cases are about more than compensation. They are about validation, about formally acknowledging that harm occurred and that it was serious. For survivors, that acknowledgement matters. It pushes back against the minimization that often surrounds crimes without visible injuries. It says, what happened to you counts. Still, no legal outcome could erase the deeper questions the girls were left with. How do you trust adults again? How do you feel safe in someone else's home? How do you stop seeing danger everywhere without ignoring real warning signs? Parents faced their own reckoning. Many admitted that this case shattered assumptions they didn't even realize they held. The belief that familiarity equals safety, that knowing someone's job, home, and family means you know their character. They learned the hardest lesson of all. Predators don't always look like villains. Sometimes they look like responsible parents. This realization forced families to have difficult conversations with their children and with themselves about boundaries, about instincts, about the right to say no, even to adults, about listening to that inner voice, even when it feels impolite or inconvenient. One detail from this case stood out to professionals again and again. A child trusted her gut. She didn't have proof. She didn't have certainty. But she listened to discomfort and acted on it. That decision likely saved lives. That moment became a powerful reminder. Instincts exist for a reason. In therapy rooms, survivors are often taught that trusting those instincts is not paranoia, it is self-protection. Especially for children, learning that their feelings are valid can be the difference between safety and silence. There was also another child whose trauma remained largely unspoken, the daughter of the man who committed the crime. These were her friends, her home, her father. She did not choose this. Yet she would carry the social and emotional fallout indefinitely. Children of offenders often experience isolation, guilt, and shame for actions they had no control over. They are forced to reconcile love for a parent with the knowledge of what that parent has done. It is a burden no child should bear. As the man serves his sentence, professionals continue to emphasize that the danger of cases like this lies not only in the crime itself, but in how easily it could have gone further. Drugging children is not a minor offense. It is a profound violation of autonomy and safety. Whether or not physical assault occurs, the act itself inflicts deep psychological harm. And in this case, harm was only narrowly avoided. The legacy of this story is not measured in prison time or settlement figures. It is measured in changed behaviors, in lost innocence, in children who had to grow up faster than they should have, and in a lesson that no parent, no child, and no community should ever forget. Trust must be earned, and instincts should never be ignored. When a case like this fades from the news cycle, the danger is not forgetting the name or the details, it is forgetting the lesson. Because what happened during that sleepover was not an isolated anomaly. It was the result of a set of conditions that exist in many communities: familiarity mistaken for safety, authority mistaken for care, and discomfort dismissed in the name of politeness. Experts who reviewed this case repeatedly returned to one uncomfortable truth: there were no obvious red flags at first glance. The home looked safe. The adult appeared responsible. The setting was familiar. That is precisely why this crime is so unsettling. It forces a reckoning with how safety is defined. For generations, parents have relied on informal trust networks: friends, families, neighbors, school connections. Those networks still matter, but this case shows that trust cannot be passive. It must be paired with awareness, communication, and boundaries. One of the most important lessons from this case came from a child. She did not have evidence. She did not have language for what was happening, but she had instinct. That instinct, the feeling that something was wrong, became her lifeline. And it is something experts say children must be taught to respect in themselves. Too often, children are conditioned to prioritize obedience over safety. They are told not to question adults, not to be rude, not to overreact. In this case, politeness could have been deadly. Instead, the girl acted. She reached out. She asked for help. She did not wait for certainty. That decision likely prevented irreversible harm. For parents, this moment underscores a critical responsibility. Children must know that they can leave any situation, no explanations required, if they feel unsafe. That promise has to be explicit, repeated, reinforced. No matter where you are, no matter who you are with, call me. Professionals also emphasize the importance of asking difficult questions before sleepovers or extended visits. Who will be supervising? Are there substances in the home? Are there clear rules about privacy, sleeping arrangements, and boundaries? These questions are not accusations. They are protections. Another hard lesson lies in understanding grooming behaviors. Grooming does not always look predatory at first. It often looks generous: fun, attentive, special, extra activities, exclusive experiences, increased control masked as care. In this case, what initially appeared to be kindness, organized outings, structured plans, later revealed itself as preparation. Grooming works by lowering defenses, by making children feel comfortable before exploiting that comfort. Recognizing these patterns is not about fear-mongering, it is about awareness. There is also a legal lesson embedded here, one that many families struggle to accept. A criminal sentence does not always reflect the full gravity of harm. The 2-year prison term in this case shocked many. Parents expected more. Survivors expected acknowledgement proportionate to the risk their lives were placed under. Instead, they were confronted with the reality of an overburdened justice system and legal definitions that often lag behind lived experience. That does not mean accountability ends at sentencing. Civil action, community awareness, and long-term support for survivors are equally important forms of justice. They affirm that harm occurred, even when the law cannot fully express it. Therapists stress that recovery from this kind of trauma does not mean returning to who you were before. It means building something new, something informed by experience but not ruled by it. That process requires time, patience, and ongoing support, especially for children whose understanding of the event will evolve as they grow. Each new developmental stage may reopen questions, fears, and emotions that need to be addressed again. There is no finish line for healing, and then there is the uncomfortable reality of release. At some point, the man responsible for this crime will re-enter society. That fact weighs heavily on the families involved. It raises questions that have no easy answers. How do you feel safe knowing someone capable of this will walk free? How do you move forward without living in fear? Professionals say the answer lies in balance, not denial and not constant vigilance, but informed awareness. Teaching children boundaries without teaching them that the world is hopelessly dangerous. Teaching trust without blind faith. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of this case is the way it reframes responsibility. Safety is not just about locks and rules. It is about listening to children, to instincts, to discomfort. It is about believing kids when they say something feels wrong, even if you cannot immediately explain why. Because predators rely on silence. They rely on doubt. They rely on the assumption that this couldn't happen here. This case proves that it can. And that is why it matters, not because of the courtroom outcome, not because of the settlement, but because of what it teaches every parent, every child, and every community willing to listen. Trust should never require surrendering your instincts. Safety should never depend on politeness, and one voice, especially a child's, can be the difference between danger and survival.